Welcome back, and I hope you guys are having a great week. Today we're going to be talking about how to make your beats knock, or how to get that punchy sound within your beats when it comes down to hip hop music. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give a few pointers that are going to be essential for a lot of us that are doing hip hop style of music. And one thing I want to let you guys know is that I'm not going to be focusing on plugins or on, secrets within the MPC. These pointers will be beneficial for anybody using, whether it's an MPC or any other drum machine, or working within a DAW, just producing music. These are just some essential tips that is really good for us to know when we are building beats. Now, the first pointer that I want to point out is something that I've struggled with, and I still fall into this struggle every now and then, but it's selecting the right kick. And selecting the right kick, especially within hip hop style of music, is very important, because that is a very important element within the frequency spectrum. Now, aside from me from doing beats, I used to mix and master music. And when I used to mix and master music, while I was mixing, the kick was not something that I was trying to make knock on these tracks. Sometimes the kick just sat in the back and the pianos were coming through and the vocals were kicking through. Like, it was just not the main element within the track. And now, us doing boom bap style of music, the kick is the one thing that I want to make sure that's cutting through the track. Now, as I'm talking about selecting the right kick, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna dive in right here on the MPC and show you guys how I go about selecting the right kick. This will work with any other machine, or even if you're on the DAW, but I'll show you guys how I do it on the MPC. What I like to do, and everybody's gonna work different, but I usually, whether you're starting with the sample first and then adding drums, or if you're starting with the drums first and then adding a sample, I'm gonna go through on how I do those selections. So let's dive right into this beat that I was working on, and I'll show you guys how I go about selecting these kicks. Now, this beat is in production, and there's no plugins on my drums. I don't have anything fancy going on, but yet I felt like it was already sounding really good within a mix, even though I have not gone to that stage yet. Oh, and by the way, this track is on Bandcamp. This is actually the first track I released on Bandcamp. So if you guys want to go ahead and support the channel, I'll leave the link to this track down in the description, so make sure you guys check it out. So like we were saying, this beat sounded really good put together. Why? Because the sample, in this case, I'll actually mute the drums. In this beat, I started with the sample. Now, within this sample, there's two elements that stick out to me. There's the vocals that are pretty airy, higher in the frequency spectrum, and then there's a bass line. If you guys can hear the bass line, the bass line is pretty boomy. Like, I have this EQ right here pulled up on Ableton. I don't know if you guys can see it in the camera, but it's really important. I don't want to confuse you guys with numbers, with frequencies, because that could be pretty confusing if you guys don't understand this as much. But it'd be very important to understand and know the frequencies and what do they sound like as you're swifting through. If you're confused and you're like, man, I don't know much about these numbers and frequencies, what I would do if I were you guys is I would put in a sample or any track right there on your timeline, and I would grab a EQ and just notch up or boost up a frequency and just swift through the whole entire frequency spectrum and listen to how these frequencies sound. Why? Because when you're chopping up a sample and you're putting samples together, you want to hear, like, is this sample a little more muddy or low end, or is it very high and airy and high end within the frequency spectrum? Because that's going to dictate what type of kicks we're going to be using for this sample. Hopefully this is making sense, but this part of the process when it comes down to beat making is very crucial in my personal opinion. So the way I go about selecting my drums is, in this case, like I said, I started with the sample and I loop the sample. I have a 4-bar loop and I'm just looping it. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna browse through my samples, and as I'm listening to the sample playing back, I'm gonna go through. As a matter of fact, we'll go to our drums, and I have them on mute. I'm gonna go to browse, And right here on my browser, I have a selection of kick drums. I'll hit play and I'm gonna audition all these kicks while I'm listening to the sample. So I'm not gonna solo and just listen to kicks by themselves. No, I'm gonna go ahead and play these kicks along with the sample to see if they're matching together. So that's why I'm not like, oh, this kick sounds good. It might sound good by itself, but in context with the sample, it might just sound trashy and dirty and it's just not gonna work. And in order for you to audition your kicks on the MPC is you see this little play button, that's gonna play the kick, and then you see this audition button, you click that and make sure auto is turned on right here where it says auto. I don't know if you guys can see that, but make sure that's turned on. And if that's turned on, as you guys go through, you could go ahead and listen to these as, you know, you're swifting through these samples. So again, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna hit play and we're just gonna play back some of these samples. There you go. Okay, this is a perfect example. This kick right here, it sounds really good by itself. I mean, if you ask anybody who's like, oh wow, it's so boomy, like I would say it sounds like it's a little more in the 80 hertz within the frequency spectrum. Nice and boomy, right? We might be like, yo, that's hip hop, man. That's so cool. I want to use that in my beat. But if we listen to it with the sample, since the sample has a bass line, it sounds like the bass line and this kick. Again, you don't have to understand numbers within frequencies, but you just have to pay attention how the kick and the bass line within the sample are masking each other. And that kick is not cutting through the beat. You see? Now, it doesn't sound that bad, but it's just not something I would select. So again, I would pass on that, but that was a perfect example of something that I wouldn't go with. I'll play it, that kick cuts through, that doesn't. Oh, that sounds nice. See, this kick sounded nice in context, so if we hear this by itself, it actually doesn't even sound that punchy by itself. It sounds kind of weak. But again, we're listening to this with the sample and it sounds good together. So this is a beat that I would, or a kick that I would select. So I would just select an empty pad and hit load. And I'm just going through. Now I'm stopping and I'm explaining as we're making this video, but in reality, I'm just going through, hitting play and just selecting samples and loading them on. I usually like to select about 2 to 3 kicks, 2 to 3 snares, 2 to 3 hi-hats, and I'll work with that. I'll unmute this this pattern that I have going on, and let's hear the kicks that I selected here. This is the kick that I went with. Again, the kick by itself, I mean, it punches through, but it's not that boomy low end. Like, you don't always have to select that muffled kick that's just boom, like you can't really feel it. Like, you see, this kick has a lot of low end, but it just sounded dirty within the sample. Like I was not gonna be able to mix it later. Again, while I'm making this track, I am thinking about the mix. How am I gonna mix this later? Because it's important. I don't wanna just select a trashy kick and be like, oh, I'll figure it out later when I'm mixing. No, I wanna figure it out right now while I'm building this beat, because my goal while I'm producing this beat is to make this track or this beat that I'm working on sound like if it's already almost finished before I even finish it. Why? Because when I take this over into Ableton, I want to just go ahead and add a few minor touches. I don't want to reinvent my beat in Ableton. Like, that's not my purpose. My purpose is just to grab my vision, which is what I have on the MPC, and on Ableton, I'm just polishing what I have already done. Now, as I'm wrapping up this video, one question that I would get asked a lot when I was mixing records was, what's the most important part of the process? Is it mastering? Is it mixing? Is it recording? Like, where should I invest most of my money? Or where is the more crucial part of building my record? And that is a very tough answer, because I've always thought like every step when it's recording, mixing, and mastering is as equally as important. if I had to choose one of more importance, would be the recording process. For us would be, you know, selecting the kicks, selecting the snare, selecting this, you know, that would be the most important if I had to select one. Why? Because if you start with a good product, I guarantee you when you're going through your mix and master, it's gonna be a good mix and master product. Instead of me selecting a trashy sound or having a trashy recording and then giving that to the mixing and mastering engineer and say, hey, you guys be magicians and make me sound good. Like, don't do that. You know, just get it right from the beginning, from the production when we're selecting these sounds that we're gonna use to build the track. Now, I hope you guys are finding value in this video. Again, I highly appreciate you guys taking the time and watching some of my videos. It really means a lot, especially if you guys made it to the end of the video. Again, guys, if you guys have not already done so, make sure you guys give this a thumbs up, and you all have a blessed day. I'll catch you guys on our next video.
So